The 10th International Yoga Day, the world unites with yoga celebrations. The Prime Minister leads the International Yoga celebrations in Srinagar. Bangladesh Prime Minister Sheikh Hasina will pay a two-day state visit to India beginning today to further expand the already close ties between our two countries. US House Foreign Affairs Committee Chair Michael McCaul, who led a US delegation to meet the Dalai Lama yesterday, spoke to NDTV and said the Tibet policy bill was hugely popular in the US Congress and the US stands behind the people of Tibet. More than 1,000 people have now died during the Hajj pilgrimage to the city of Mecca. Well, our big focus, the first incoming bilateral state visit by a foreign leader after the formation of the new government in India following the Lok Sabha elections. Bangladesh Prime Minister Sheikh Hasina will pay a two-day state visit to India beginning today to further expand the already close ties between our two countries. Now, Mr. Modi and Ms. Hasina are scheduled to hold wide-ranging talks tomorrow, during which both sides are likely to firm up a raft of agreements, providing for cooperation in several sectors. As you are well aware, Bangladesh is India's biggest trading partner in South Asia, and India is the second biggest trading partner of Bangladesh in Asia. My colleague Vishal Vivek is tracking the latest developments for us. He joins us live at the moment. Vishal, take us through Sheikh Hasina's plan of action.
So, Parmeshwar, there is expected to be at least a few MOUs that will be signed between both the countries. As you have mentioned earlier, both the countries have been close for a while, and this visit will bring this country even closer. So, as you mentioned, few deals will also be signed, and just to give you some perspective, India is actually Bangladesh's biggest partner in South Asia, and on the other hand, India is Bangladesh's largest export destination. To shed some more light on that, approximately 2 billion of Bangladeshi exports to India were sent in 2022-2023. So it's a big partnership that is set to be expanded by this visit. She'll be here for 2 days, Sheikh Hasina, and she'll also be meeting the President Murmu and also the Vice President Dhankar, and also expected to meet the Foreign Minister S. Jaishankar. As we have been reporting, that MOUs will be signed, and we are expecting that there will be cooperation extending to other areas such as science and technology and other affairs as well. So we'll be bringing you the latest.
Thanks so much, Vishal, for joining us with the latest update. Also, for a quick update from Ground Zero, we have with us Sakil Emma joining us live from Dhaka. Thank you so much for joining us on the World 24/7. Sheikh Hasina's visit has taken precedence over a trip to China in July. Would you say this signals a shift in Dhaka's foreign policy?
No, Dhaka is always in the same constant policy of the friendship to all and malign to none. So in the same policy, so it was a pre-decided visit in July, and I think in this visit to Delhi, there can be a little discussion on Tista agreement. So far I can read in the media. The foreign secretary described before that there can be a discussion on Tista this time, but mainly this visit is on the light of the business cooperation and trade cooperation is the main focus of this visit.
Right. So the decision for this bilateral visit to India, many would say, was somewhat sudden. But in terms of the plan of action, you're saying the focus is likely to be on trade and connectivity?
And the trade and the connectivity, especially, there is a northern district, there is a place called Ramgarh. There is a Bharat Maitri Setu. There is a chance to open, and declaration will come from this visit. There will be more connectivity, not only in economical but also in physical connectivity. I say in Ramgarh and India will be connected through a Bharat Maitri Setu. That a declaration can come in this visit. But as we were telling that it's a sudden visit, of course it's not a sudden visit. It was a pre-decided when Sheikh Hasina visited just in 15 days back on the oath-taking program, and it was decided before she will visit this time. And also she will invite Modi to visit Bangladesh, and hopefully we'll have a date in this visit.
Well, many are saying it was somewhat sudden because it was decided just in the last fortnight. But thank you so much, Mr. Ahmed, for joining us with that quick update from Dhaka. Ms. Hasina is India's first state guest since Mr. Modi assumed office for a third time, and also her first overseas state visit after she came to power for the fifth time in January this year. The other crucial story we're tracking, the death toll from this year's Hajj has exceeded 1,000, with more than half of the victims unregistered worshippers who performed the pilgrimage in extreme heat in Saudi Arabia. The new deaths reported on Thursday include 58 from Egypt, according to an Arab diplomat who provided a breakdown showing that of 658 Egyptians who died, 630 were unregistered pilgrims. This is what The Guardian UK is reporting. But about 10 countries have reported 1,081 deaths during this pilgrimage, whose timing is actually determined by the lunar Islamic calendar, but it fell again this year during the oven-like Saudi summer. Well, today marks the 10th International Yoga Day, and this year the theme is Yoga for Self and Society. The yoga event took place on the banks of Srinagar's Dal Lake at the Sher-e-Kashmir International Convention Complex with the Prime Minister in attendance. But since 2015, when the UN proclaimed June 21 as International Yoga Day, the already popular practice has found more followers in multiple countries. As for Delhi, the global acceptance of yoga marks its soft power influence, useful as the country seeks to discover a greater and more influential role in global affairs especially. Many countries have incorporated yoga into their healthcare systems. In fact, the World Health Organization has now initiated the process of developing a benchmark document for standards in yoga training. The Prime Minister was in Srinagar earlier this morning. Here's what Mr. Modi had to say.
इजिप्ट ने, मिस्र ने एक कंपटीशन ऑर्गेनाइज किया और उन्होंने टूरिज्म से जुड़े हुए जो आइकॉनिक सेंटर्स थे, वहां पर जो बेस्ट योगा की फोटो निकालेगा या वीडियो निकालेगा उसको अवार्ड दिया। और वो जो तस्वीरें मैंने देखी, मिस्र की बेटियां सारे आइकॉनिक पिरामिड वगैरह के पास खड़े रह करके अपने योगा की मुद्राएं कर रही है, इतना आकर्षण पैदा कर रही है। और कश्मीर के लिए तो योग एक बहुत बड़ा रोजगार का जरिया बन सकता है, टूरिज्म के लिए बड़ा आकर्षण का केंद्र बन सकता है।
In other news, US House Foreign Affairs Committee Chair Michael McCaul, who led a US delegation to meet the Dalai Lama in India, spoke to NDTV and said the Tibet policy bill was hugely popular in the US Congress and the United States stands behind the people of Tibet. He also hit out at China, saying Tibet has never been a part of China. That's just a lie. Here's an NDTV exclusive, thanks to my colleague Vishal Vivek.
We have with us Senator McCaul. He was the leader of the delegation that visited India to meet the Dalai Lama. We will ask him a few questions. Do you think the visit was successful, Mr. McCaul?
I think it was a great success in terms of the Tibetan people in Dharamshala who welcomed us with very warm hearts. It was a great sign of showing of support from the American people to Tibetans. Even though their land has been taken by Communist China, their spirit still survives. And our meeting with the Dalai Lama was very strong, very positive.
So, what is your message to China now that you must have heard they have commented on your visit? What is your message to them?
My message is do not destroy the culture of these people, their religion, their culture, who they are. Every people and country have the right to self-determination. So the bill that we passed in Congress basically says it's the policy of the United States to let the people of Tibet determine their fate and their future. And I think that's very important.
In extension of that comment that you just made, do you think there's hope for Tibetan people?
I do. I know the Dalai Lama believes that he can negotiate with the Chinese Communist Party. I have some reservations about that. But I think our trip obviously got on the CCP's radar to send a strong message that the United States stands with the people of Tibet in this issue, and that Tibet has never been a part of China, and that's just a lie. I mean, Tibet's never been a part of China. I think the CCP sends the disinformation, which is in our bill as well, to appoint a representative to deal with the disinformation that spread the lie that Tibet was never an independent nation, which it has been.
Since it was a bipartisan visit, how do you think both the parties got together on this contentious topic?
This is a hugely popular issue in the United States Congress. It passed bipartisan, unanimously at a committee, unanimously on the House floor and Senate, and the president's going to get ready to sign it. So I think this sends a really one voice with one nation, the United States of America, behind the people of Tibet. We heard from these two young women who escaped the Chinese prisons that they were put in because they were simply trying to flee the oppression in Tibet. It was a very strong and powerful story about the abuses by the Chinese Communist Party, whether it's the Uyghur Muslims or the Tibetans. Human rights are very important to the people of the United States, and that's why we stand with Tibet.
Thanks a lot for speaking with us, Mr. McCaul.
Thank you.
In other news, the Israeli government and its army are feuding in public after months of simmering tensions over the military campaign in Gaza. The armed forces spokesman said that this week that the idea that it's possible to destroy Hamas to make Hamas vanish, that is throwing sand in the eyes of the public. His comments drew a sharp rebuke from Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, who has asserted that the war will only end with Hamas's complete destruction. But days earlier, Mr. Netanyahu lashed out at the army's plan for a limited pause in operations in Gaza to allow for more aid distribution. There's an enormous lack of trust. The military no longer believes in the political leadership, parts of which no longer believe in the army. This is what a retired Israeli general has said on record. In other news, Dutch Prime Minister Mark Rutte is set to become the next Secretary General of NATO after his only rival dropped out of the race. Romania's president informed the military alliance that he was withdrawing his bid at the end of last week. While Mr. Rutte is now the only remaining candidate in the race, he is yet to be officially confirmed by member states. When Mark Rutte moves into his office at NATO, he won't get much of a honeymoon period. He has been running the EU's fifth largest economy for 14 years, and he's widely praised as an effective consensus builder. But even for a seasoned politician, the next chapter of his political career, many experts argue, won't be a walk in the park. Let's actually take you through the top 5 challenges he'll have to deal with. Well, 4 weeks after Mark Rutte starts his new job, Americans, they go to the polls and could re-elect Donald Trump, a NATO skeptic. On the campaign trail, Trump has threatened to cut US aid to Ukraine if he gets back into the White House. And if he follows through, it could deal a severe blow to NATO allies' credibility in helping Ukraine defend itself against Russia, given that the US has actually, by far, been the biggest military aid donor to Kyiv. As soon as Mark Rutte enters office, Ukraine will be calling him for help as winter approaches. Over recent months, as you know, Russia has stepped up strikes against Ukraine's thermal power plants and dams, infrastructure that actually takes months, if not years, to fully repair. NATO this week celebrated a record-breaking number of allies reaching the 2% of GDP target on defense spending, 23. Indeed, the Netherlands just passed that threshold this year after years of falling short. But this means a third of the alliance is still not hitting the mark, despite making that pledge 10 years ago. Also, countries bordering Russia are not Rutte's biggest fans. They were quite angry about low Dutch defence spending and are particularly upset that the top role at NATO has always gone to a Western or Northern European, even though Eastern flank countries have been in the alliance for a quarter of a century. But it's not just Trump whom Mark Rutte will have to convince to keep NATO alive and well. Across Europe, NATO skeptic and Putin-loving far-right parties are blossoming. So it's fair to say that one thing he doesn't need to fear: his new job will not be boring. Switching tracks, Slovakia's parliament has voted to approve a government plan to overhaul the country's public radio and television services, a move that critics say would result in the government taking full control of the media. The coalition government of populist Prime Minister Robert Fico agreed on this measure and said the changes are needed because the services are politically biased and in conflict with the Slovak government. But thousands have repeatedly rallied in the capital, Bratislava, in protest of these changes. Well, switching our tracks to the United Kingdom now, Rishi Sunak is forecast to become the first sitting British Prime Minister to lose their own parliamentary seat at an election. This is what an opinion poll published by the Telegraph newspaper ahead of the July 4th national vote shows. This poll shows around 18,000 people were polled between the 7th of June and the 18th of June. And it reveals that Sunak's Conservatives are on track to be left with just 53 seats in Britain's 650-member House of Commons, with the opposition Labour Party forecast to win 516 seats as per this latest poll. Unfortunate news next. Donald Sutherland, whose acting career spanned 6 decades and included starring in such highly acclaimed films such as Don't Look Now and The Hunger Games, has died aged 88. He died in Miami after a long illness. In other news, Travis Scott has been arrested in Miami on suspicion of disorderly intoxication and trespassing over an argument on a yacht. Travis Scott's arrest comes just days before the start of his European tour, which kicks off in the Netherlands on the 28th of this month. And Travis Scott is also scheduled to perform in London and at the Co-op Live venue in Manchester on the 13th of July. Welcome back. The former CEO of Cisco Systems, John Chambers, spoke to NDTV regarding EVMs and artificial intelligence threat to democracy. Additionally, here's what Mr. Chambers thought of the future course of India-US ties. Listen in to Maha Siddiqui's report.
I have with me the chairman of the US-India Strategic Partnership Forum, John Chambers. Many thanks for speaking with NDTV. My first question is simply with regard to the relationship between India and the United States that you have seen evolving while being at the helm of affairs at USISPF.
Well, many people have called me the biggest optimist, the biggest bull on India in the world, and I am. I bet a large part of my career back in 2006 when at Cisco as chairman and CEO, I made India our second world headquarters. And very often we get trends right, but we usually also see the future, if you will. In terms of the U.S.-India Strategic Partnership Forum, it was about 7 years ago in Gujarat where we outlined a vision of what could happen if our two countries really worked close together. We said not only can it become the most strategic relationship in the world, but together we believe that India would be the fastest growing GDP in the world and that a partnership between these two nations could be the model for the rest of the world. Many people thought it was a stretch too far, yet as you saw with the events last year with the state visit with Prime Minister Modi and President Biden, it happened. So if you watch, what we've been able to do is identify the key trends going on in the market. How did every side and every citizen, both countries, win by this relationship? So I think the last 8 years have been exciting, but you haven't seen anything yet in terms of what's going to happen.
So even as we speak, the US NSA, Jake Sullivan, is in India, and the focus of discussion is on ISET, the initiative on critical and emerging technologies. So my question is with regards to whether initiatives of this nature and some other agreements that we are seeing increasingly between India and the US, are they focused on a common adversary, China? Or do you think that the relationship has now reached a point where it has its own standing and momentum?
Well, I think even more basic than that, Maha, if I may. I think the relationship was originally done because of the opportunity for our countries to work together toward a common good. And the good has been very good in terms of the economic growth. And as you saw, we have common alignment in terms of if you're going to lead in the future, you've got to lead in two categories. You've got to lead in AI, and you've got to lead in startups and high-tech growth, which become part of everything from agriculture to manufacturing going forward. So if you look at what we're trying to do is the countries that lead in those categories will be the leaders 10 and 20 years from now. AI will be the equivalent of the internet, probably by a factor of 5 to 10-fold. The internet and cloud together by 3-fold. And the speed of change, Maha, is going to be amazing. So when countries can work together to say, how do we perhaps lead the world? And if we do together lead this world from an AI perspective, from a critical infrastructure perspective, from a commonality perspective, then we can help the economic benefit of not just all of our citizens in both countries, but of the world as a whole. Put a different way, let's take some common interest. The infrastructure is very key. So the market in the future, it's going to be about supply chain. It's going to be about logistics. It's going to be about manufacturing. It's going to be about how you use AI to tie all this together. So for our two countries to work in terms of an architecture for this and perhaps do something that's never been done, not by having transactions in each of those 4 categories, but working across in a way that can change the world. That's why I'm so optimistic about the future of our countries together. So I think this is a very good step in a common way. Are there some issues that India has a chance to benefit from because of perhaps some of the missteps by China? And remember, I was one of the first companies to bet on China in 1995 when I first became CEO. So I believe in China and the Chinese people. However, it is about innovation and democracy. It's about working together toward a common goal. And I think India and the U.S. find themselves aligned on many, many issues together. Not just from a traditional alignment, but how do you strategically partner in the way that our two leaders said a year ago, that it will be the defining strategic partnership for this century. Okay. The ability to really make a difference.
So, you know, you've touched upon some of the issues like supply chain resilience, semiconductors. Some of these issues came up in a big way during COVID when countries were reassessing their dependence on China. But since then, 4 years down the line, do you think things have changed? Is that our countries actually pulling out of China or not wanting to go there? Or do you see this just a momentary sort of a phase in the entire supply chain manufacturing arena?
Well, in some ways, it's a phase that has occurred before. Inevitably, over the decades, and remember I've been in mainframes, mini computers, PCs, the internet, cloud, and now AI, trends you see again and again. When you become too dependent upon just one source for your components, you're very much exposed to a natural disaster or a change in political fortunes. However, to really be dependent as a democracy, you want to be dependent upon other democracies, and you want to have very much comfort level in terms of the integrity and the trustworthiness of what you put into the infrastructure. So if you watch what India has brought, that perhaps China has lost, it is that trust. It's the understanding of a win-win environment. And it's the understanding of how do you work together toward a common goal. Over time, the U.S. and China will get back together. That, I think, will be a given. But if you really watch where the relationship will be between the U.S. and India, I think you'll see every decade us pulling further and further together for the benefit of the world as a whole, but for our countries as well.
Thank you. Thank you for speaking with us.
My honor.